It was a warm afternoon in Tacoma, Washington. In March of 1986, spring was beginning to creep back into the Pacific Northwest. The clouds were high, the air was cool, and the children were finally returning to the playgrounds after a long winter. At Puget Park, the sound of laughter echoed across the grass. 8-year-old Michella Welch had come to the park with a friend. Like countless children before them, they brought their bikes and rode along the paths that curved through the park's open fields and wooded edges. Puget Park was familiar to families in the area. It was the kind of place where parents felt comfortable letting their kids play. There were swings, a small playground, and a quiet area where children sometimes explored the edge of the trees. That afternoon seemed perfectly ordinary. Michella was described as a cheerful girl with long brown hair and a curious personality. She loved playing outside and riding her bike. To anyone passing by that day, she looked like any other child enjoying a carefree afternoon. At some point during their play, Michella and her friend rode their bikes toward the wooded area of the park. It wasn't that far away, just a small stretch of trees beyond the playground, but only one of the girls would return. When Michella didn't come back, her friend began to worry. The minutes stretched longer than they should have. Eventually, the concern turned into panic. Adults were alerted. Parents began searching the park. The police were called. Within hours, what had started as a normal day turned into one of the most disturbing disappearances the city had ever seen. Searchers flooded Puget Park. Officers walked the trail. Volunteers combed through the wooded areas, calling Michella's name into the quiet forest. Helicopters flew overhead, but there was no sign of her. Her bicycle was eventually found near the wooded section of the park. That discovery changed everything. This was no longer just a missing child. Something terrible had happened. The search continued through the evening and into the following days. Tacoma police, local volunteers, and even members of the community joined together, hoping to find Michella alive. But days passed with no answers. Then, 3 days later, the search came to a heartbreaking end. Michella Welch was found dead in a wooded area not far from where she had disappeared. The city was stunned. Parents who once allowed their children to roam the park freely suddenly kept them close. Tacoma, like many communities in the 1980s, had believed it was relatively safe. This crime shattered that illusion. Investigators began searching for whoever had taken Michella from that playground, but there was almost no witnesses, no clear suspects, and very little evidence. The case quickly became one of the most haunting mysteries in Tacoma. Years passed, then decades. For Michella's family, time never dulled the pain. Every year that passed without answers made the silence feel heavier, and the city carried the memory of what happened in Puget Park. But Michella's case was not the only tragedy haunting Tacoma. Just a year after Michella disappeared, another girl vanished from a Tacoma playground. Her name was Jennifer Bastian. She was 13 years old. Jennifer disappeared while riding her bike in Point Defiance Park in 1986, only months after Michella Welch's murder. The similarities between the two cases terrified the community. 2 girls, 2 parks, 2 seemingly random attacks. For decades, investigators believed the crimes might be connected, but the truth would remain hidden for more than 30 years. Then, in 2018, something changed. Advances in DNA technology allowed detectives to revisit old evidence from the case. Techniques that didn't exist in the 1980s were now capable of finding answers buried deep in genetic material. Investigators began testing preserved evidence from the crime scene, and finally, after decades of uncertainty, they found a match. The DNA pointed to a man named Gary Hartman. Hartman had lived in Tacoma during the 1980s and had a history of violent behavior. When investigators confronted him with the DNA evidence, the mystery that had haunted Tacoma for decades began to unravel. In 2019, Gary Hartman pleaded guilty to the murder of Michella Welch. More than 30 years after that quiet afternoon in Puget Park, the truth had finally surfaced. For Michella's family, it was the answer they had waited for decades. But nothing could undo the moment when an ordinary day at a playground turned into a tragedy that would haunt an entire city. Today, Puget Park still exists. Children still play there. Parents still watch from the benches nearby. But for those who remember 1986, the park will always hold a shadow, a reminder of the day when an 8-year-old girl rode her bike into the trees and never came back.